Hello, Babajaros. Babajaros sees. Badios, I donated that. It means fake. It's fake instead of bullshit. In other words, a disgusting thing. It's because we need an emphatic because we are in a semi-ancient trap that knew it propagated self-cultivated roles, self-value, criminal insidiousness natures of psychopath natures of communists, principles treatments with the nature of debate and or aggression and and or the difference of that, the estimation of it, perspective of it. You guys came through criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions, raw campuses A through Z, the difference of them as collusion slash S, also used by the breaching method. Everything the breaching method uses and does is through ourselves. So it can keep that collusion, those collusions, plural, past, self-value while it's being active, and how it shows people that they need to hide things to come, like the kids and or the adults of interbranch family members, wherein how manifest nature has been demonstrating that every day the words of the people of the sciences had obligated, like of American history, they had obligations to speak other for the integrity of those branches, which we know was not. They were out without integrity. They were being counter-extorted and are still being counter-extorted. But they overcame that method of counter-extortion, the rules with the extortion, torture, slavery method. That's why and how they had to leave it entrenched, northern colonies, southern colonies. It's still entrenched because the breaching method is still teaching American history. And it's keeping everyone blaming other things, others ourselves. It showed the teachers of it, they have to do that by blaming the kids, the parents. And then the parents have roles with that. So they have to blame the teacher. Everyone blames other things, others themselves, besides itself. And then that made all sides right at the same time, but wrong at the same time, exactly the way the breaching method needs. Everyone needing to simultaneously be gotten over on. Nature values the difference of the simultaneous from the finite. Nature shows us if someone is using a system tactical ulterior from its own, where it communicates with positive or negative. Where we have black pupils, whites of eyes. Where we have cell nucleus, cell body, cell wall slash S in the body of life, the body of identities, hypervolume science coming through it. Appreciating positive or negative, the gases in their mixture, the water and its elements. Everything is about, too, how it is functional, how it is hyper invisible, but still discernible. Distinctly from, like, we can discern if the smallest finite details left out. We could discern if grouped, let alone grouped and simultaneous. But more and more we are losing means to discern this, because the breaching method shows with collusions with itself, with its method too, singular. And needs to value how everyone already had collusions, and or styles, needs, and natures of blaming other things, others, ourselves. And or styles, needs, natures of sensing for the breaching method if anyone addresses it. On a mass scale, at countries A through Z, people are pretending things are debatable that are not. The only reason they're getting away with it is because of a predicate acts with facts method. I'm not even a lawyer. At all ages and natures of campuses. That was his hyper additionally collusion slash S from off the campuses with use of all locations slash S. Everywhere the human species body has a species body. Hyper criminally foreign influence. No unwanted collusions. Everyone had exceptions made for themselves. They had the only means they could counter negative value nature progression acts natures to self-value roles more and more which only means to cause positive value, nature, progressive acts, nature, as if the self-value of criminal and seditious natures of means to cause positive value, nature, progressive acts, criminal and seditious natures of positive treatments, including as facts, as truth uses. America is not about dominance. America is about getting the Constitution unabridged. That is where our power and was where our might came from. We're not about the hegemony. Hegemony, it's a word. It's invisible but still discernible. Just like the name of a god. Not the invisible, but the hyper-invisible but still discernible that English is revealed to teach about. The other languages. This is where we are discerning the body of the hyper-invisible but still discernible. Hyper-conjunctive to the parts of speech of languages and of English grammar. They're all about the invisible but still discernible, the parts of speech, the subject, the words, the names for the verb, more than one. Why and how we need to appreciate more than one name for a verb. We have means to discern the body of the hyper-invisible but still discernible to an extent. Where and how we have means to discern why we could only appreciate subjects individually grouped and simultaneously to an extent. But with that, we could further discern and know to an extent a further distinct hyper-simultaneous, greater than and more finite than, what any individual ever could. It's showing us it's controlled. It's showing what's manifest, why and how there are totally different species bodies of individual bodies. It's generating all group differences as its own. And as its own followed its ways here. Or our value system is forced from here. As Earth's special differences are our own. As forced space nature transfer. As lethal hadiths. Well, I thought, I never read it defined that way. But here many pray because the sciences have been criminally foreign influence since before religious messengers were born. And one of the reasons there's a need for forgiveness is because there have been collusions only allowed. And to discern the breaching method is right where we have to discern, like what witch trials are about. Witch trials about means to discern how the branches of government, the intelligence tied to them, they were involved with slavery at the same time, northern colonies, southern colonies. They were involved with that breaching method sickly distinctly, getting over on Native American differences, forcing everyone tactically denatured ground, needing value nature systems, mass farming. And then for other reasons, all the positive and negative too, used in other contexts too. See, now we are through systems tactical interior from the human species body of individual bodies, all group differences. We're demonstrated that we have the same colorized, different colorized at the same time. Even languages use difference simultaneously in ways simultaneously greater than and more finite than. Math could appreciate it, or psychiatry. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a doctor either. But there are criminally foreign influence, tactical illusions wrought, semi-natures of principles treatments, and offensively identity theft fraud, slanders roles, mass falsified transcripts, and how they got away with this and get away with this so long is their collusion /S with campuses A through Z, which was also and is also a collusion from off those locations that no one wanted collusions with. And even when they have real motivations to have collusions with it, they don't even understand it. They never stop being used remotely. Criminally foreign influence / hyper-criminally foreign influence at countries A through Z. I see them with the suits and ties, counters and exceptions, and suburbs manifest the way they are from America to Russia to Ukraine. They were designed for a torture, extortion, slavery method. People get away with debating such because per the relativity, of other being haven't been communicated for our founders. The only one we know the name of is James Madison. And then he was a president too. He had to classify for himself and for the other presidents and for the other Native Americans who are our founders, or even the ones who didn't agree to use his plan. But there are proofs that Native Americans agreed to use his plan and helped them. And even the ones that didn't agree with it helped. They did damage control because nature itself is showing them we are not using a hyper-native system. We're not even allowing natives to define themselves that way, the way their ancients, the way nature itself wants them to. And they are punished if they don't describe their culture and things a certain way with the syntax, with the nature behind it, with the collusion/S, with state of Connecticut corrections officers and judicial branch officers involved with organized crime acts and methods per a worse than war crimes method. And it uses wars to cover that up, including ones since the World Trade Center attack and from years before that. These are people that need to pretend everything's about guilt so they can't get on paper legitimately. And so they could cover up how they've been stacking predicate acts with facts into the databases into branch, fake transcripts, evidences, collusions with crime scenes originally and still with all sides of criminal and civil cases, at the same time putting the same sequence shifts and other federal evidences, crimes, illusions and delusions, self-valued while being and haven't been used remotely at the same way, at the same time, to the names with the courts, their family members, other natures of conjunctions to them. The difference of that or people with corners tied to people they know. Increasingly, corners on Highcrest Street have people involved with identity thefts, fraud, slanders, involved with the O'Brien family, a Jennifer Kennepicky, a Rick Cianfaglione, a Timothy O'Brien, a Ray Colon, people involved with Russia, and Ukraine has Russians involved. For them, people with the name Peruta, and I don't know the other names, people with Hartford Hospital, involved with sexual and medical offenders of kids, people from Ukraine, people from Korea, people from Italy, Ireland, some black KKK, Confederate flag theme, Latino theme, Italian theme. They're putting fake things at the same time, and then they're using that to get away with other. Then they even have the people with the sexual spots next to the campuses. And they try to pretend passions and emotions change and fake motivations because they're screening their motivations. Because one of their motivations is they're used criminally foreign influence / hyper-criminally foreign influence and intercities. They have roles with murders, untimely deaths, forced child abusers, leaders of kids, a whole bunch of fake punks pretending passions and emotions about what other people say on social media as the ones interbranch, changing and faking the digital evidences and forcing child abusers, leaders of kids, like with the Joshua Julian. Also between internet companies, Joshua Julian is involved with a bunch of people with Hartford Hospital and next to it, involved with my neighbors named Colo, with a Phil Colo, for the Weathersfield police. They won't get on paper. They also play these games with a time where people are going to be and make people say a statement to them, and you don't respond. Most people aren't going to respond. They're just going to fake anything anyway. All natures of investigators never stop being used remotely, criminally foreign influence, tactically, delusions, raw, and having that as their motives. Including if they were victims, they have increasingly victims, self-valued roles, including with what starts wars. They're increasingly self-valued roles, preventing me of free speech and from getting me off the fake conversations with others, including the news at the same time, interbranch, collusions with them about the World Trade Center attack, interstates with Connecticut news locations. Get them on paper, one name and sequence. They've been putting fake paper since I was a kid. They won't put paper because it will bring up what they have collusions, all kinds of criminal enterprises, private ones, involved with all kinds of natures of identity theft, fraud, slanders, instances connected at and next to each of the campuses I went. Involved with a Joe DeMoro, for example, the first campus I went in Weathersfield. They have roles of people named Mendez and Sioka involved with the West Hartford campuses and with other campuses interstates. These are people involved with people with the name Scalora, with sexual and medical offenders of kids, with foreign and domestic medical families, overt criminal enterprises and private ones involved with Miami, Washington, D.C., New York City, Connecticut, Vermont. They have all along Route 3 in conjunctions to it and to that. A Mr. Neville and a Neville families involved in interstates with the agencies and a whole bunch of people like a Eric Jensen, a Mike Pandolf. I never met his brother, Anthony Pandolf, but he's also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. He might have been one of the people that died too. And that might have been because there are proofs that foreign and domestic intelligence families have been murdering people. Also, per their uses of whiting forensics and producers with the news agencies like Fox Connecticut News. They know they have recorded, like they're telling people to call the police. The police, they faked me being at the police station and speaking to them as a kid. And then as an adult, like with two Mendez police, also next to Fox Connecticut News, involved with some people named Domain, who reported, confessed, demonstrated from their roles with sexual offenders of little boys and girls, also religious themed, and with like people with the name Allison, I believe Mulcahy. And I don't know if she has other people related to her, and her neighbors are involved also next to Fox Connecticut News. Involved also with a Jewish teacher I had per him and her, who repeated about sexual things and intimate things about her, a girl that lived near me. I never saw her in my life. And her boyfriend to my math class. And it was me and three other kids in the class. One of them was, and that has rules with the security families, as families, to exploit it that way because they're getting over with words like adult and maturity, where and how they have behavior racketeering, medicines, crimes, and collusions with it, including people that are not even doctors, like people who have social roles with a social worker, and they're putting more, layers of hyper additional collusion / apparent motivations and real ones. The campuses have replaced with James Madison, what our founders had communicated for them, had to have declassified for themselves, to have communicated for themselves and for us. But instead, we have their words read without that interpreted. We have it worse than obfuscated. Marbury versus Madison. Real justice must satisfy all appearances of real justice. Black people. We're all supposed to see the whites of eyes. I don't even know who said it. That's the only thing we all remember. Because distinctly, there are these totally distinct natures of organized crimes. And there's a singular method by the difference /S of them. And the three branches of government and the intelligence tied to them never had the integrity. As we can see, they can't follow mandated law legitimately. And they're hiding this by putting fake transcripts through administrations too, and showing the equivalent to that. They're also leaking that way. Hartford Hospital increasingly had roles with the World Trade Center attack. And the foreign and domestic militaries, not one of them have possession of their identities. They cannot speak for the Constitution unabridged. They cannot speak for exceptions. They cannot speak for exception nature. They cannot speak for a special difference and entertain principles, treatments as they have been entertained. Differences, treatments as they have been entertained. In other words, please follow mandated law for them. Please be led by the hyper-invisible but still discernible. We are shown two parts of the rest of the complete identity too. Like as the present participle and the past participle. Two parts of the hyper-invisible but still discernible. And the future, like the seasons that are not even here, even if they never get here, we could discern their body already. and they're only increasing value, and its identity, a relationship to itself. Again, that which we can discern as individually grouped and together as countries, we have ignored and have replaced it. And where and how this happened, all truths regarding it, they were and are used for lies and to screen lies between them and collusion/S. Because really, what caused this is how the sciences became criminally foreign influence, tactical illusions raw, and incapable from collusions forced from off them, specifically to affect the defenses of fact, tribute nature, quality aspects in nature. More and more incapable of affording what it was, and or anyone now too, to have short words with convictions proper, and not have any way to take that down or change it. So they've been stacking every year predicate X with facts, and they've been keeping whole careers a certain type of criminal insidious nature, a certain type of victim/hyper victim, victim predator, hyper predator, /hyper predator, and the slash part as criminal insidious nature itself, but as hyper criminal insidious nature too. For example, the North and the South sickly distinctly had rules with crazy laws against every human difference. But like even slavery was against our own black pupils and whites of eyes, was entrenched in northern colonies and southern colonies. The only reason that's not clear is because there are collusions replacing what our founders had declassified for us to appreciate. And again, the only founder we know the name of is James Madison for a reason. But you guys aren't allowing that reason to be used to free speech, to get the Constitution unabridged, to get the fake databases demonstrated, how they've been hiding lie progressions with a torture method. They become shocked and awe once the elderly get in elderly homes. They're going to say, "Oh yeah, I like it." In other words, they're not going to the people's career. In other words, it's a method. Watch, it's the same one that they're using to keep people's mouths shut with the prisons. What they're doing with the crime spot scenes, what they're doing with the exits, like in town lines. The difference of criminally foreign influence at campuses or next to them. We're like in New Britain, Connecticut, increasingly people along the route 175 from Wethersfield to there, from the founding locations, rolls with natures of organized crimes that they can't defend and afford simultaneously to have properly taught why and how. There's a witch trials place next to Webb House, now renamed the Webb Stevens Museum, and how and why then and now still they're communicating other for those places and for our founders. Then they're supposed to explain how and why George Washington had to come there and to Harper and to the interstates with the help of the founders who counter-extorted him and everyone else, including the rest of the Native Americans. No way they had the means to break those internationally monitored conversations without some of the Native Americans behind, and as our founders too, which they all are anyway. They can't help it. Nature shows us that. But then the colonists coupled with that. But we only know that one name, James Madison. And that plan they all used. We're supposed to understand that as his plan. You guys have replaced. You guys, you don't know this? You guys are using knowledge of good and evil out of sequence. You guys can't afford what it says right at the beginning of the Old Testament, the beginning of the Quran to be discerned. Because the campuses have been used criminally, foreign influence, tactically, delusions raw, collusion/S, per a function by that, to keep them here or there, and the difference of the two, of the roles with the collusion/S at all locations that no one wanted. But then too, this breaching method knew that nature would demonstrate that. Nature would demonstrate itself increasingly. There's a human fact, nature breaching method manifest at countries A through Z, at locations, areas, and states A through Z. And we've been trying to counter it syntactically as the names of the human species body, of individual bodies. Now all group differences as through while entertaining group differences through a system of tactical terror from its own, and that defended one can't afford short words by group differences properly by individual, the order of the finite, the order of what is active or group, and or simultaneous. Excuse me. So know how we could appreciate subjects individually grouped and simultaneously to an extent, specifically so we can discern the rest of the hypersimultaneous. Vaccine. So be led by it's not hegemony. It's why and how nature itself is forcing us. We need to defend while they're unnatural, hyper unnatural impositions on countries A through Z. They can't even discern the hyper unnatural ones, but they will be able to. But part of the reason they can't discern it, or not to an extent, is because they have their hands full. Well, all the negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures we know, and how that we know we can observe, they blamed all that was actually demonstrated with that on other things, others ourselves, leaving out and screening to the hyperform breaching method and other names increasingly involved with all natures of crime scenes, but through our own too. That's why, and the motivations of it are manifest relative to the people at and next to the campuses through time, countries that were here and there shared. First, because of nature, we are locked human species body of individual bodies. We're locked unity and locked independence. They're not supposed to be compatible. We have what is hyper additional nature and how it is being made, being demonstrated to us, how it wants to be and stay positive, also positive onto itself here, or it is forced from here, not as death. It shows us that too. There's a difference between death and a negative identity relationship to itself, which is forced. Part of how it shows us that is showing us forced space nature transfer. It shows us its body to an extent, wherever we can discern its body to an extent. Again, like how it's not our species body, it's not the other species bodies, but it's that one generating all the species, distinct species bodies, and all group differences of the species bodies of individual bodies. The hyper invisible, but still discernible. It is what we are appreciating when we appreciate why and how we need to appreciate more than one name for a verb. It's why and how we are appreciating. Subjects, again, individually grouped to and to an extent, we can only appreciate to an extent. And that comes with a demonstration of why and how per it. But see, now it also comes with demonstrations of a breaching method involved. But that also comes with demonstrations of names A through Z involved. Forgiveness is because as long as we leave out the breaching method with blame, it were being used remotely by itself, or as a style sensing other people, or as a style of shock and awe. We are shock and awe at A through Z. Here, Anthony. Boxing. So they put wire crime action methods. Weathersfield police are some of my sources. They have a Kelly Kaczmarek who brought up the CIA, who's involved with a bunch of people along Route 175 with the investigators, constantly influence them to plant fake ties, fake nature, the ties to me. And they don't, in other words, they don't understand that to themselves. But it's also their roles with coroners manifest. They don't understand themselves. And it's also all from the founding locations in Old Weathersfield, all along Route 175. People involved with organized crimes, with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, terrorists, the World Trade Center, Washington, D.C., and their educators, and the corrections officers and judicial branch officers. At the same time, with overt criminal enterprises, private one, terrorists, and the Saudi attackers. And all sides were used remotely, too. That's recorded. There are means to discern that, and because they did things categorically to hide that sins, as the ones who had collusions before that, too. all kinds of natures of organized crimes, and the types of counters to things, even victims advocates, some of the worst roles with criminal enterprises influencing uh, influence roles on off campuses, even when they're not at the campuses, with the names there, putting predicate acts with facts in databases. Also, just fake ties and natures or ties to people, so no one will be able to go back and speak about the past without everyone changing and faking what they say, jumping in dishonesty. You guys are incapable of honesty. You guys are, in other words, all exception nature show that you're incapable of having discerned your uses of truth. That's why you can't get on paper legitimately, but as collusion/s when it's too late, more and more.